Welcome, and we're so glad that you're here for another mental health and wellness chat. I'm Brittany, and I'm one of your VC Counseling Center counselors, and today I'm here with
Chelsea Bradley, one of your psychology faculty members.
and today we're going to dive into a topic that affects how we connect, love, and even argue, and sometimes without even realizing it, attachment styles. So these are rooted in our earliest relationships. Attachment styles shape how we show up in adult relationships, whether that's dating, forming deep friendships, or even just trying to navigate conflict. Do you pull away when things get too close? Do you worry about being abandoned? Or maybe you feel mostly secure, but you have no idea why some relationships just feel off. So today we're going to unpack how attachment actually plays out in real life, not just in theory. So whether you're avoidant, anxious, secure, or somewhere in between, this conversation can really help you understand yourself and others better is our goal today. So ideally, self-reflection can help us build stronger, more fulfilling relationships. So we are here with the expert in the room, which I will refer to as Chelsea. I have some working knowledge of attachment styles. It's obviously things that we work on in therapy, and it can be like a focus of your therapy, which is totally appropriate. But I think she has some really interesting insights for us. Okay, let's start with understanding what it is that we're even talking about here. So can you help us explain the four main attachment styles as a person?
Absolutely. So, you guys have probably heard of attachment styles on social media. I'm seeing it talked about a lot more
Yeah.
on TV shows, movies. I even follow a couple of psychologists on TikTok who specialize in attachment styles
Yeah.
because I myself am a young-ish adult navigating them. So, just to kind of break down the four main attachment styles. There's secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized. You'll find that they're very aptly named, which is what I like to tell my students. Secure attachment is essentially exactly what it sounds like. You're secure in your relationships. These are people who find it easy to trust, rely on, and communicate with their partners. So they view someone they're dating as a resource to help carry their burdens. They want to help their partner carry their burdens. They're comfortable with intimacy and the vulnerability that comes with it,
Yeah.
but they're also comfortable with autonomy, doing things on their own, letting their partner do things on their own. We often group the other three styles under the general term of insecure attachments because they all represent an attachment that's insecure or apprehensive in some way. Anxious attachment is characterized by a need for closeness that often comes with a fear of abandonment. So, this is a person who might have difficulty trusting their partner, believing that they're going to stick around. And so they can become clingy, jealous, or just generally be really emotionally up and down with their partner.
Yeah.
Avoidant attachment is almost the opposite. That's what we usually mean when we call someone a commitment phobe, somebody who you just can't tie them down. They pull away from closeness. They cling to independence instead. They struggle with the vulnerability that comes from relying on someone else and opening up and really digging into their emotions. Disorganized attachment is sort of like a combination of the other two. There's a mix of anxious and avoidant behaviors, and often you're switching back and forth between them in a way that's really disorganized, which is why we call it that.
Yeah.
And if I can put on my teacher cap for a second, research on attachment goes all the way back to John Bowlby in the 1950s. Did you know that, Brittany?
Yes, I did.
Essentially, research on attachment styles has shaped a lot of how we view adult relationships. It's shaped a lot of the methods that you probably use in the counseling center.
Yeah.
And leading research suggests that attachment styles circle back to early childhood.
Yeah.
The attachments that we form really starting from infancy, and the strategies and coping mechanisms that we develop to deal with our social world.
Yeah.
And when we're really young, our social world is pretty much our caregivers, whoever the adults are, your parents, grandparents, the adults in your life that are taking care of you the most consistently. And so, as children learn to get their needs met, they develop strategies to deal with caregiving that's either consistent and secure or caregiving that is less than ideal.
Yeah.
So, securely attached people often had consistent, warm, emotionally available caregivers who were responsive to their needs. So if they needed comfort, they got it. If they needed a diaper change, they got it.
Yeah.
And so it provided sort of a secure base for them to explore autonomy and individuality. When people have insecure attachments, it's often rooted in some form of non-ideal caregiver or inconsistent caregiver behavior that they may have had to adapt to.
Yeah.
So, for example, anxious attachments have been linked to caregivers who were inconsistent, sometimes there, sometimes not, which leaves the child unsure of what to expect. Maybe sometimes their parent is warm and responsive, but other times they're dismissive or unavailable. And that can lead to the child not being able to predict if their needs will be met or how they'll be met.
Yeah.
Avoidant attachments often occur in situations where the caregivers were emotionally distant, or maybe they discouraged emotional expression as a whole. Sometimes that's a cultural thing, sometimes it's a gender thing, sometimes it's just a personality thing with the parent.
Yeah.
When a parent is consistently failing to meet your emotional needs, it can cause you to develop a pattern of suppressing those emotional needs because you've learned that when you express them, they're not really going to be met.
Mm-hmm.
And that can cause that person to essentially develop a pattern of not seeking comfort, affection, or reassurance from others because you've learned that it just leads to disappointment.
Yeah, it's not safe to do
Yeah,
anyway. So
exactly.
Mhm.
Disorganized attachments are statistically the least common style. This style is sometimes called fearful avoidant because it stems from chaos or trauma in childhood. Beyond just being inconsistent, these parents may have caused real fear in the child. Maybe there was abuse, maybe they witnessed abuse of some kind, maybe it was just a lot of screaming and yelling.
Mhm.
Maybe a parent was frequently threatening to leave, or maybe the conflict between parents escalated frequently. So as a result, the child develops this really confusing relationship with their caregiver. This person I'm seeking comfort from is also the source of the fear and harm that I'm experiencing. I like to describe disorganized attachments as like a campfire on a really cold night where you really, really want the warmth. But if you get too close, you can get singed or you can get really badly burned. So it creates this ambivalence of, I want to get closer to you, but you could be the thing that causes me harm.
Yeah.
And so you're afraid of getting too close because you might get burned even without warning. The main difference between disorganized and anxious partners is that a disorganized partner can only cling to you for so long before they need to push you away. And the main difference between disorganized and avoidant partners is that they want relationships and intimacy, while avoidant partners tend to avoid those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of those styles that can really be an emotional roller coaster because you're seeing both avoidant and anxious tendencies in one person.
Yeah.
And I want to note before we get too much farther into it that friendships and relationships along the way also impact attachment styles. So you could have a really secure relationship with your parenting, but if you were cheated on, if you have had a lot of betrayal or difficulty with friendships, or maybe you've experienced a lot of rejection for one reason or another, that's also going to shape your overall attachment style.
Yeah.
So don't go home and blame your mom because you can't make a relationship work.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily because of bad parenting.
Well, and I like that you said that too, because I think that I agree that, our parents, our home life relationship, whoever our caregiver may have been, really shapes a lot of the foundation in the sense of like, if you can imagine, if I go home and what I'm met with in terms of parenting is a parent who's absent, never around. Maybe they show up every once in a while. And when they do show up, it's clear they don't really care that much or they're very dismissive. I mean, that's kind of for the first, at least 16 years of my life, this is where I'm learning what a relationship is. So
Right.
then whenever I go out into the world and I find a romantic partner, it's reasonable to assume that I've never really had an opportunity to be treated in a different way or to connect with someone in a different way. And there's no rule book for any of this at the end of the day. We're all just kind of winging it as we go
Exactly.
along and figuring out as we go. So, you know, like like Chelsea said very aptly, it's not something that's coded into you and it will never change at any point. No, this is something that with time, conscious effort, or even with new relationships, this is continuously evolving over the course of our lifetime.
Exactly.
And it's always within our control, which is very empowering too at the same time.
For sure.
So, okay, what does this look like? We threw a lot of very advanced information at you. So let's break this down of how does this really show up in romantic relationships? Because a lot of times when people come in, they're not really focused on friendships most of the time. Most of the time people are like, I have all these relationships and they're not going the way that I want them to, or I'm not being the partner that I want to be, but there's these things inside of me that make that hard. So what can this actually look like in reality? So for example, like how would an avoidant partner react in a conflict in a relationship?
Yeah. So we definitely start to see patterns of attachment emerge when we transition into adulthood,
Mhm.
regardless of whether you're a college student in the workforce, maybe even already parenting by the time you reach young adulthood. So
Yeah.
obviously, our students come from every walk of life. Typically, the first time you get into a serious romantic relationship with a fellow adult, you will start to learn things about your behavioral patterns that you didn't know before.
Mhm.
You can learn a lot about yourself through friendships and relationships with your family, but I always like to say nothing really shows you who you are
Mhm.
until you're trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
make a partnership work with somebody.
Yeah.
Because it's really the ultimate test of how do I communicate? How do I deal with conflict and problems? And so you, if you're listening to this and you've never really been in a serious relationship, you may have no idea what your attachment style is like.
Yeah.
Some of you guys listening to this are going to hear me describe some behaviors and go, oh no,
That's me.
that's me. Hold on and don't turn the podcast off because you're getting up in your feelings.
Yeah.
Don't crash out on us. I promise if by the end we will have talked about how to deal with recognizing those patterns in yourself.
Yeah.
So in relationships, insecure tendencies can manifest in a lot of ways. And I want to kind of make a little disclaimer before we start digging into those specific behaviors. There is a big difference between behaviors that are challenging in relationships and behaviors that are toxic and harmful and abusive.
Yeah.
When Brittany and I are talking about attachment styles and we're pointing out these behaviors that can cause problems in your relationships, keep in mind that we are referring to small instances of insecurity and withdrawal that can sort of build up over time and put roadblocks in the way of happy and supportive and healthy relationships.
Yeah.
What we're not talking about is jealousy that leads to controlling or abusive behaviors, withholding emotion as a form of punishment, someone who screams and yells and threatens to leave you if you do something that they don't like. It's normal to have insecure tendencies. It's not normal for those tendencies to become abusive and harmful. And I'll sort of explain the differences as we go, but I just want to give that disclaimer before we dig too much into these specific behavioral patterns.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, avoidant partners really struggle with emotional closeness. So, in conflict, they might shut down, withdraw. They say things like, I just need space. And really, what that's code for is, I don't know how to deal with the emotions that you're bringing to the table or the emotions that you're asking me to dig into. And so I'm going to say something like, I need you to give me some space. But really, I'm sort of hoping you'll forget that you brought it up in the first
Yeah.
place. This one I know a lot about because unfortunately, I tend to have some avoidant
Oh my
tendencies.
gosh, we're going to have the best discussion. I am an anxious through and through. So we can give you a really good highlight between the two of us.
And we make our friendship work. So if that gives you hope. So avoidant partners often feel overwhelmed by emotional intensity and they reject situations where they're being asked to show vulnerability. Remember that at some point in their life, very likely with their, childhood caregiving situation, they learned from a pretty young age that emotional expressions are not acceptable or maybe they're not helpful and they just lead to disappointment. And so they learned pretty quickly to sort of wall up and bottle up their emotions. I'm not going to bother other people with it because they're not interested. And that can lead to maybe even avoiding dating altogether because they find it easier to be single than to let their guard down long enough to go on a first date. Personally, I find nothing more nauseatingly vulnerable than a first date.
Yeah.
So when you're trying to avoid situations like that, so this person may be single way more often than they're in a relationship. Often with avoidant types, their partner is initially attracted to what they view as emotional stability. Man, this person is calm, rational, they're very steady. The problem is that they're not calm and steady because they have a great handle on their emotions.
Yeah.
They're steady because they're not dealing with their emotions at all. So what you're actually seeing is someone who is suppressing emotions, not someone who's managing emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And that's an important difference. In more toxic scenarios, an avoidant person may become intolerant of their partner's displays of emotion. They might shut down displays of affection. They might make them feel silly for being excited about things, or they might make you feel stupid for getting upset about something. And this constant invalidation of their partner's emotions comes from, again, that learned pattern of invalidating their own feelings, which then causes them to start invalidating your feelings as the partner.
Yeah.
Over time, the partner may then learn to tamp down their own emotions and personality to appease them. So again, it's important to illustrate the difference between an avoidant person who doesn't handle conflict well and tends to sort of avoid it at all costs, and an avoidant partner who is creating an environment where nobody gets to deal with their emotions in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Anxious partners, on the other hand, might become clingy and sort of hyper focused on their partner's mood. They might spend a lot of time thinking and thinking and thinking and thinking about how the relationship is going. When there's emotional distance, or what they perceive to be emotional distance, because there is a difference, they might overtext, overanalyze. They might feel like something's wrong even when it's not. So, for example, maybe their partner had a long day at work and they didn't get a chance to be on their phone a lot. And so, normally on a slower day, we're texting back and forth a lot. And now on this day, suddenly it's sort of radio silence.
Yeah.
If I'm an anxious attachment type, I might start sitting there going, oh my gosh, what did I say that made them suddenly withdraw?
Do they not like me?
Yeah. Do they not like me? Am I annoying them? Are they not interested in me anymore? When in reality, they're just busy at work. And so by the time they get home, you've already created this narrative in your head that they're mad at me and there's a problem, when in reality, they just had a busy day at work. And so it can start to create conflicts when what you really want to do is communicate to them, hey, I felt like we lost touch a little bit over the last couple of days because you've been so busy at work. And instead it becomes, I'm going to pick a fight because I don't know how to just communicate that to you.
Yeah.
And so this can kind of lead to what the kids, I think I'm using this right, the kids say crashing out, and spiraling and panicking. So anxious partners need a lot of reassurance that they're loved, worthy, and that you want to be with them and that everything's okay.
Yeah.
Ironically, anxious partners are often very attuned to their partner's needs. And so they can be really great at knowing what you need, verbalizing their affection to you, telling you that you are worthy and valued, and I love you and I'm excited to be with you. But it's like they can't turn that same grace on themselves.
Yeah.
And so initially their partner may be attracted to how attuned they are to their needs. But remember that avoidant attachment comes from inconsistency. So this is a person who's learned to read people very well. If you find yourself paying really close attention to people's body language, clocking their micro expressions, paying attention to what they're looking at, the face they're making as you're talking to them, it might be a sign that you're honing in on their reactions because you're looking for some kind of sign that they might be disinterested, annoyed, frustrated.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for signs that your partner is detaching in some way, then that can be an indicator of an anxious attachment style. In childhood, you probably used this tool to, figure out what you could expect from your parent. Am I going to get love and affection today, or are they sending signs that they're going to be irritable and distant? And so learning to predict what you might get from your caregiver can be a good social tool later in life. It's great to be able to read people. It's great to be self-aware.
Yeah.
But when that self-awareness starts to become apologizing for taking up space and, constantly reassessing every single social interaction you have, that's when you can start to have problems in your relationships.
Yeah.
Toxicity with anxious partners can look like intense jealousy and suspicion, dependence to the point that they're incapable of being alone or spending time apart from their partners without being in constant contact. Their partner may spend so much time trying to meet their needs that they start to neglect their own needs. They may be afraid to initiate conflict because their partner will have an extreme reaction to it. So those are the more toxic indicators of anxiety in those relationships.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point to come back to at the end too, is that with anxious attachment, anxiety is at the core of it. And it's anxiety that I want to be alone, you don't like me, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable in some way, which, like you said, leads to me overcompensating in a relationship, or leads to me constantly scanning for threats of danger, or leads to you constantly worrying. There's a difference between a fear and reality. And a lot of anxious attachment is based in fears, which are something that obviously it's a possibility, but rationally, what's actually objectively happening here in this moment.
Right.
For sure.
Exactly.
So, okay, when you probably have already seen a lot of this in social media and the likes, but when two people with anxious or attachment insecure styles get together, can these relationships work at the end of the day? Because, I mean, realistically, how many securely attached individuals exist in this planet? Most of us are one or the other of the different, more disorganized types. So can these relationships work?
That's a great question. I'll start by talking a little bit about what secure attachment looks like in a relationship, and then sort of talk about how two insecure attachment styles can combine to become secure. Because that's the good news about attachment, is that because it's so malleable and flexible, meaning it can really be molded by experiences over time. Again, if you're hearing this podcast and going, oh no, you can absolutely become securely attached in the right environment, under the right circumstances. Any relationship is, capable of, actually, let me rephrase
I was
that.
going to say, you should be a couples therapist with that belief.
Maybe not any relationship, but the majority of relationships that you find yourself in, when insecure attachment is presenting itself in a way that is not abusive and toxic and harmful, there is almost always space for those insecurities, the anxieties, the avoidances, even disorganized attachment can be healed over time and create a secure situation. Securely attached relationships are not perfect relationships. Securely attached individuals will also experience human moments of anxiety, insecurity, even avoidance. So it's important to remember that being in a securely attached relationship doesn't mean that you never experience any kind of turbulence. The difference in securely attached relationships and insecurely attached relationships is really just that they bounce back from conflict more easily because there's that inherent acknowledgement, communication, and effort from both parties. You can't have one person who's securely attached and one person who's insecurely attached, because eventually that will create an insecure attachment in and of itself. Both parties have to be self-aware enough to know what their tendencies are, and then be willing to communicate with their partners.
And put in the effort to choose different behaviors, healthier behaviors.
Exactly. So the biggest difference between secure partners and insecure partners isn't that they never feel negative emotions or they never need space. It's that they know how to acknowledge and communicate these things in a way that doesn't, A, make it their partner's fault. It's, you're the reason I'm feeling insecure. You're the reason that I'm pushing you away because you're too much. But they can engage in self-reflection and acknowledge how their weaknesses might be contributing to problems in the relationship. They can communicate these things and they don't let them fester unnoticed like mold until the foundation of the relationship is crumbling. Secure partners find it easy to trust people, and they view their partners, again, as a resource for comfort and support. They want their partner to help shoulder their burdens, and they want to shoulder the burdens of their partner. They see it as a two-way street. In conflict, they're reflective rather than accusatory. So they look at themselves first and then sort of bridge into communication about what their partner, what they need from their partner, or how are we going to work together to solve this issue. And they feel comfortable with confrontation because they're not afraid of scaring their partner away. In relationships where there are insecure styles that are combined, the biggest problem is often going to be that you're triggering each other's fears. So an anxious person might pursue while an avoidant person withdraws, which causes the anxious partner to cling, and then the avoidant person starts pushing them away even harder. And it creates this really painful cycle of, I'm trying everything I can to get you to stay, but the more I do, the more you want to pull away and flee because I'm doing what you perceive to be too much.
Yeah.
And you can really start to hurt each other in that kind of
Mhm.
cycle. However, if both people are willing to work on self awareness and communication, change is possible. A lot of times, this starts with individual self work. I'm not a fan of that phrase, you can't love someone until you love yourself,
Mhm.
because I just think that's fundamentally untrue.
Yeah.
There have been times where I have really not liked myself and still been able to pour a lot of love into my friendships and my family and my relationships.
Yeah.
I think a more accurate phrase is that you have to know yourself before you can be a healthy partner to others. If you know you have a tendency to sabotage relationships, struggle with turbulence, push people away, it might be a sign that you need to heal some things within yourself before you can be a healthy partner to others. Therapy is grateful for that,
Yeah.
by the way. Plug for the counseling center.
Well, and even too, I mean, it can be, it doesn't, these aren't, when we sit here and we say this, it sounds like, oh my gosh, this is probably like a 2-year process. No, like it can be as simple as, even for example, in my own life, I know as a partner, I have a tendency to assume the worst when things are ambiguous. So when I don't have enough information, my anxiety is going to immediately make it a negative thing.
Mhm.
So a simple fix to that is to recognize that that's happening and then take a step back and say, tell my partner, can you tell me what's happening right now?
Yeah.
Or, tell me what you're experiencing, because then rather than assume, I can get the information directly and then we
Mhm.
can make an informed decision from there.
That's a great strategy.
And it can even look, for something or for someone who's an avoidantly attached partner, it can even look as simple as, rather than just escaping the argument or discussion, saying something as simple as, hey, I'm going to walk away. I need a minute to figure out what's going on. I'll come back later. And then you both agree to take a step away. So this is where, like you said, therapy can be really helpful, because a big part of therapy can be figuring out what those small tweaks can be to start choosing healthier behaviors and reflecting on yourself and having a healthier relationship overall.
Yeah, you don't need to spend, 3 years in isolation to figure out everything that's wrong with you before you're ready to be a good partner.
Yeah.
As an avoidant person, one thing I found really helpful in my own relationships, whether it's friendships or dating, is because I'm aware that I have a tendency to try to fix a problem myself before I bring it to anyone else for help,
Mm-hmm.
which again, is just something I developed from being a very independent person. I'm going to fix my issues rather than burden others with them.
Yeah.
First thing was learning that my problems are not a burden, which was something I did in therapy. But in relationships, I communicate to people, hey, I know I have a tendency to withdraw when I'm dealing with something. And sometimes that can make people in my life feel like I don't want to let them in, or that I'm holding them at arm's length. It's helpful for me if you just ask me specific questions. So rather than saying, how was your day? Ask me a question like, how did that meeting go this afternoon that you were a little bit worried about? Do you feel like that went well?
Yeah.
Because it reminds me to dig a little bit deeper than just, yeah, work was fine.
Yeah.
If I know that you're asking questions, I know that you are interested in it, and it helps kind of reinforce this idea that I'm safe to talk about how I'm feeling with you because I know that you're interested and invested.
Yeah.
And so it can be something as simple as implementing some kind of specific question that you ask your partner to let them know, hey, I'm knocking at the door. I want you to dig a little bit deeper.
Yeah. Absolutely. Setting yourself up for success in that way, and also being able to, and it always circles back to communication. Every time we talk about any of these things, you guys should be tired of this at this point, but it is. Communication is so important, because that's kind of how we get to these healthy places in our lives. It's always the ground zero step in any of this.
Yeah.
So, there are so many. Attachments theory is so popular in social media, pop culture. And I love that, because people are talking about it more, which is great, because I feel like it gives us more and more concrete examples, because this theory is very abstract to a lot of people. So the more that we see it in popular culture, the more that it becomes understandable, digestible, the more examples that we get. But there's also a lot of issues with misconceptions, misunderstandings in popular culture as well. And just off the bat, one that I see a lot is that an attachment style is set in stone. That this is what you are, this is what you were taught, your parents ruined your life, and now you have to spend the rest of your life being anxiously attached, which is absolutely not true. Like we've already said, it's something that with conscious effort and a healthy relationship that you can absolutely work through and become a much healthier partner. That's not to say that you might not still have some anxious tendencies, but like I said, just because my brain thinks something bad is happening right now, that doesn't mean I have to put weight into it. Brains
Exactly.
kind of do what they do, and it's our job to be in control of the reins and kind of pick where we're going with this. But Chelsea, what do you feel like are some other common misconceptions you want to get ahead of?
One that I see a lot is when we treat our attachment style as though it is a foregone conclusion that we just have to live with rather than something that can be fixed.
Yeah.
So sometimes people can use an unhealthy attachment style as a bit of an excuse. I have an anxious attachment style, so I need you to text me constantly when you're out with your friends and I'm not there. I have an avoidant attachment style, so you can't expect me to open
Comfort
up and
you.
talk
Yeah.
about my feelings or comfort you. You know that that's just not how I am.
Yeah.
The point of knowing your style is not to use it as an excuse for harmful behaviors. It's to grow from it, not stay stuck in it. Sometimes we can pathologize behaviors. That's our word of the day, kids. To pathologize something just means we treat it like it's a symptom of an illness that we just have to live with. It's unchangeable and unavoidable.
Yeah.
And while there's absolutely behaviors that are pathological, and those behaviors often lead to diagnoses of, psychological disorders, depressive anxiety disorders, even personality disorders, when we pathologize every behavior, emotion, or thought pattern, we might inadvertently teach people that they should avoid, suppress, or accept them as inevitable instead of understanding and working through them.
Yeah.
Or alternately, we may view someone who has an insecure attachment style as stuck in that style and write them off too quickly.
Yeah.
So someone, tells you that they have an avoidant attachment style and opening up can be tough for them. Or they tell you they have an anxious attachment style. And so it can be hard for them to feel secure without maybe verbal acknowledgement of, everything's okay. And we hear that attachment style phrase and we go, oh my gosh, well, they're not the partner for me.
Yeah.
You can miss out on some really great potential relationships that can be absolutely secure and healthy. By jumping ship at the first sign of any kind of insecure attachment. Remember that people are human. They will have human moments. Those human moments will not always be attractive, but not everything is a red flag that immediately requires evacuation.
For me, you being able to tell me what your attachment style is immediate green flag. Most of the time, if
Exactly.
you put in the time and effort to look at
Yes.
this and understand it, I feel like it's a sign that someone's working on themselves for sure. So, okay. What do you feel like? I'm trying to figure out how to digest my words here because there's been a lot of really good information thrown around. So, how can communication patterns with people, so especially in really high emotion situations, what are some typical behaviors that we could see in relationships that would pop up that would be easier to recognize?
Yeah. So communication patterns often are kind of the first indicator of your attachment style. They're probably at least the most potent reflection of your attachment behaviors.
Yeah.
Anxious individuals might engage in what counselors often call protest behaviors, which just means sort of anxious behaviors where you're protesting that person pulling away, or you're protesting that there's uh, I don't want to say you're throwing a fit, but it's almost like you're throwing a little fit. Over texting, picking fights to get reassurance, like we talked about earlier, panicking when someone doesn't respond quickly enough. Avoidant folks might stonewall you. So they might disappear for a while. They might minimize their emotions or minimize your emotions. That's not always because they don't care. Sometimes it's defense mechanism. I'm trying to minimize the emotion of the situation because I'm trying to almost comfort myself out of the panic that I'm feeling that emotions have gotten this high. And I feel like I'm in the middle of a very turbulent storm and I don't know how to find the paddle. So sometimes me minimizing the situation is just me trying to jump in the lifeboat and calm things down. And the only way I know how to do that is to kind of go, okay, this is really not that big of a deal. even if it is a big deal. With really in the insecure attachment style, but especially avoidant and disorganized, we can sometimes see ghosting behaviors, especially early in relationships, where conflict feels so threatening that cutting off feels safer. So the first time you have conflict with a new partner, your instinct is, as Taylor Swift put it, to bolt, just run away as quickly as possible. That song really resonates with me. But understanding these patterns can sort of reduce the shame around them and I think open the floor for healthier communication.
Yeah.
Brene Brown has this really great technique that she talks about called the story I'm making up.
Yep.
I am obsessed with Brene Brown. Shout out if she ever hears this. Just know I love you, girl. So the technique is the story I'm making up. It's this tool for clarifying a situation and sort of challenging unhealthy or irrational thought patterns and learning how to stop them in their tracks. So this works by acknowledging the narratives that we often create in our own minds.
Yeah.
For example, you might be telling yourself, my girlfriend isn't texting me back because she's out with her friends and she's having more fun with them than she does with me. So that's the story you're telling yourself, right? So the first step is to challenge its accuracy. Has my girlfriend ever said she doesn't think I'm fun? No. Didn't she tell me that they were going to be doing karaoke and catching up because they haven't seen each other in a while? Yes. So isn't it more likely that she's not texting me back because she's singing bad karaoke or somebody's catching her up on all the drama with their coworkers and that's why she's not attached to her phone? Yes. And don't I want her to have a great time, even if I'm not around, because I want her to enjoy her life? Yes. So it's challenging the story. And then when you've learned how to recognize when your own brain is creating a narrative that's not true, that means you can start cutting those narratives off before they've taken hold in your brain. And it means that you can communicate with your partner in a way that is not, again, putting the onus on them to solve it.
Yeah.
The story I'm making up is that you have more fun without me around. That's the reason I was being short and moody with you today. You didn't do anything wrong. It's just that the other night when you were out with your friends, I didn't hear from you. I sat here alone and told myself that you were having fun without me and didn't want me around. And I followed that train of thought and I shouldn't have.
Yeah.
So I'm communicating to you that I'm feeling a negative emotion, but I'm not blaming you for that negative emotion.
Where I feel like the contrast, I feel like most people in that scenario would confront the situation and say, well, you didn't text me all night. That obviously made me feel a type of way. Like big difference in how we're communicating, like why I'm behaving the way that I am and what I'm feeling.
Exactly.
And even taking this a step further in terms of examples, like, for example, my partner is also avoidant, so this is super fun. So I can give you a real example here, real time, right? So for example, an issue comes up and you bring it up as an anxious person and you say, you know, this is what I'm experiencing. And obviously when there's a conflict, we have a tendency to get emotional, right? So then emotions start getting high. So for an avoidant person, that might be terrifying. And so like you said, in order for me to regulate in this moment, I need to stop talking. So let's say the avoidant stops talking. Okay, so as an anxious, when you stop talking to me, now all that I'm left are with my assumptions of what you're feeling, which because I'm anxious are panicky, end of the world, negative, always mean that I'm not enough, right? Which feels awful. So then I might talk more, say, well, why are you being so quiet? Well, here, let me give you some examples of what you must be feeling because, you know, if you just talk to me, I might feel better. But for an avoidant, I'm not going to talk to you because I need to be isolated in order to feel safe. So really, we both have the same end goal, right? We both want to feel safe at the end of the day. But for me, feeling safe as an anxious person is getting validation and reassurance from you. Whereas for an avoidant, feeling safe is getting away from you and regulating alone. So the more that and a great example of an avoidant trying protesting behaviors is, let's say my avoidant partner walks away from me. So as an anxious partner, I'm left sitting here and I say, well, fine, walk away. I'm done with this. I'm not going to talk to you about it anymore. So then I go and isolate myself and I'm sitting, I'm thinking, I'm getting more anxious. The more that I think, I'm getting more and more anxious. And that feeling builds up so much that I have to go find you to keep talking about it. So I end up coming back 100 times repeatedly, where this is a protest behavior. And it can even look like texting, like you said too, where I just text repeatedly, like back to back to back of, you know, I'm done with the conversation. Now I'm not. I'm done with it. Now I'm not. And it can seem very, especially from an avoidance perspective, it can seem very overwhelming because it's like, my gosh, like you just keep coming at me no matter what I do, which just makes you shut down even more. So you can see how they can become very self-defeating, very high emotion at the end of the day, if not regulated in a healthy way.
And my avoidant protest behavior against your protest behaviors might be that I do have things I want to say to you, but because I'm viewing you demanding that I say those things as frustrating on my part, I'm going to let you go sit in silence and be by yourself. And I'm going to intentionally get under your skin by ignoring the situation, refusing to come and engage with you. So again, it can become this vicious circle of you're doing things that you know are going to get under my skin when really you're just trying to communicate a need. And then rather than communicating to you that this is not helpful to me to meet your needs, I then counter that with an avoidant behavior of my own.
Yeah.
And then before we know it, are both resentful, both angry, both sitting in silence. And that distance between us is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. And I think that's a big thing to bring up too, is the connection between emotional regulation and attachment styles, because really, I mean, that's most of what a lot of, as a human being, emotions are at the core of most things with us. I guess what I'm trying to say is emotional regulation is such a key part of being a human. And I feel like a lot of times in relationships, we assume it's our partner's job to help us regulate these emotions, where I think that's a big part of a secure attachment is moving towards being able to regulate your emotions independently.
Yeah.
And then also choosing to be with another person too, if that makes sense.
Exactly. And again, I think that the biggest difference here is to recognize that a securely attached partner is not void of negative emotions or strong emotions. It's that they regulate them well. They have learned how to self soothe, they've learned how to ground themselves, they've learned to look at their emotions realistically. And they have learned how to ask for help from a partner without making it their partner's responsibility to fix.
Yeah.
So when you reach that point of secure attachment in a relationship, it doesn't mean you never have any other, like you never have a problem again, you never have a negative emotion again, communication is always perfect. But anxiously attached people might feel those same really intense emotions, but without external reassurance from someone else, they can't quiet the turbulence in their own brains. Avoidant people have learned to suppress their emotions and numb their emotions, and they can talk themselves into thinking that that means that they're regulating their emotions well, when really they're just not dealing with them at all. And again, anybody who's ever owned a home can tell you that if you leave a problem that needs to be fixed unaddressed for long enough, what started as a small problem that could have been fixed pretty easily turns into something that can destroy the very foundation of your home. And it's the same thing with avoiding your emotions. You can't bottle them up for too long because eventually you're going to run out of space. And that's where we might see, an explosion or maybe negative behaviors turned inward, leading to self-loathing and things like that.
Yeah.
With those disorganized folks, which we haven't talked about as much because again, it's not as common of an attachment style. But with disorganized people, they might do either one depending on the situation. But their difficulty with emotional regulation will often boil down to self-sabotaging behaviors or sabotaging the relationship. They're so certain that rejection is coming, or they're so certain that their emotions are too much for you to handle, or that you're going to get tired of dealing with them and move on, that they will either refuse to talk to you about their feelings, or they'll lump their feelings on you so turbulently that you do end up having to leave. And then for them, that's confirmation. Yep, I was right. There's that rejection I was waiting on. And so, again, really what it boils down to, like Brittany was saying, is that learning individual emotional regulation where you're not dependent on that partner to help you deal with those emotions, but that you have them there as an additional resource, not your sole resource.
Yeah.
That is really what is going to separate
Mm-hmm.
a secure attachment from an insecure attachment.
Yeah.
Not being void of emotions, but understanding that I am ultimately an adult responsible for regulating my own feelings.
Yeah. And the other person is just an addition to and a support to that, which we don't want to underscore either. You know, your partner, yes, your partner can provide emotional support, and that is a healthy trait to have.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, Chelsea, dependency, I think, is the biggest
Right.
difference. And like we talked about earlier, you know, as non pathologizing as possible, how do we go about beginning to look at this idea? You know, there's lots of websites, quizzes, and things that you can take that can kind of help you categorically understand. The Attachment Project is a really great free resource to be able to do that. But I feel like one good question and thought experiment can help with this too, even. So asking yourself, okay, close your eyes, imagine someone that you love and really, really care about in your life. Past, present, doesn't really matter. Imagine the person you care about the most. The two of you are in a conflict right now. You're feeling that conflict. There's a huge disagreement. There's a lot of emotions here, right? So, how would you react if you felt like that person pulled away from you emotionally in that moment? They told you, go away. I don't want to be around you. How would you react? What emotions would come up? In that scenario, are you becoming clingy? Are you shutting down? Would you overthink? Would you try to fix things as quickly as possible? Would you leave and abandon them first? I mean, what would be your gut response to that scenario? And I feel like that can say a lot about your attachment style too.
Yeah. And another question you can ask yourself is, do I find it difficult to trust that what other people are saying is true, that they mean what they say, that they'll show up for me? Or is it difficult for me to rely on other people? Do I find myself either really craving someone in my life that I can rely on? Or maybe does the idea of having someone who knows everything about me freak me out? Does that make me feel, so raw and exposed that I start to panic at the very thought of it?
Yeah.
And where might that come from in my past experiences? Again, we can look at our childhood and parenting and things like that, but also look at friendship patterns, look at previous relationships. A lot of these behaviors are learned behaviors that just need to be unlearned. So, do I find it difficult to trust others and rely on them?
Yeah. And I think another great one too that people really don't ever consider is I want you to define for yourself emotional safety in a relationship. When I say that, what does that mean to you uniquely? Because I feel like every time I ask someone this, I get a slightly different answer. But what does that emotional safety feel like to you in a relationship? And how do you know? And really, this is asking how you know when you feel insecure, right? Or secure. And then what is disrupting that? So, for example, if you were to ask me, Brittany, what does emotional safety feel like in a relationship? And for me, it feels like I have the ability to feel what I'm feeling, express what I need to express, work through that verbally out loud with someone, and for them to not be scared away by that, for them to not be, turned off or reject me for that, to just hold space for whatever I'm feeling or going through and still accept me at the end of it, and it'll look different for each individual person. That doesn't have to be your answer, but it's a point that I feel like people don't reflect on of
Yeah.
really defining what is emotional safety for me in a relationship, and don't just define it by what it's not. Because I see that too. People will say, well, it's definitely not my partner judging me. No, flip it. We needed an affirmative.
Yeah.
What do you want in that relationship?
Right. And that's a really great point. So I want to sit in that for a second. Don't move past it too quickly, because we spend so much of our time, I think, when we think about relationships. Why am I single? Why do I, why did that breakup happen? Or why doesn't this person want to be in a relationship? We spend a lot of time thinking about the negatives, the why nots. Why didn't this work? But shifting your focus to, well, what would an ideal relationship look like to me? As a more avoidant leaning person, I think a big part of emotional safety for me is having a partner who sort of takes care of things that I would normally take care of myself without me having to ask him to do it.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm a person who's learned the tendency to I'm just going to fix it. As soon as there's an issue, I'm going to fix it. If a trip needs to be planned, I'll take care of planning every last detail. If dinner needs to be planned. I'll figure out what we're going to cook. So having a partner who sort of knows me well enough to predict my needs
Mm-hmm.
and then sort of almost forces me to let them help
Yeah.
could be something that makes me feel emotionally safe and secure. Man, this guy
Mm-hmm.
really gets that I don't always know how to ask for help. So he doesn't make me ask for help before he figures out what I might need.
Yeah.
And so knowing what good looks like rather than just knowing what bad looks like is a really crucial part of
Yeah.
figuring this out.
And getting specific with it too, because I feel like a lot of times if you ask it as plainly as, what is your ideal partner? People will list traits, right? They'll
Mm-hmm.
say like someone who's honest and dependable and blah, blah, blah. But dig deeper. What does trustworthy look like for you? How
Yeah.
does a person demonstrate trustworthiness? And I feel like with pointed questions like that, you can kind of dig a little bit further to say, well, someone who is always there when I need them to be, great. That's a great trait.
Yeah.
Or that's a great relationship dynamic to have, or a feeling to have. So that can be great too. And then even asking yourself too, how do I respond when a partner needs space or becomes emotionally distant? So
Mm-hmm.
what is my gut reaction? Do I just drop the situation, walk away, and it's their responsibility to bring it up later if they want to talk? Or am I the person that clings a lot closer and I get really uncomfortable with that distance because it
Mm-hmm.
means that they're probably not going to need me or that they don't want me around? Do I try to close that gap and, get closer to them? This and the response of how your partner needs space can be a really good indicator too.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what do we wish more students knew about attachment and the impact that it has on emotional life and relationships?
I think other than what we've already talked about with, knowing that it's changeable, knowing that it doesn't mean you're doomed to unhappiness, I think just knowing that at the end of the day, this is not about blaming your parents. It's not about diagnosing your partner. It's about looking inward to understand your emotional blueprint. Your
Mhm.
attachment style doesn't make you broken or bad. It just shows you what kinds of safety and love you're used to and what kind you might need to learn to receive.
Yeah.
It's about getting to know yourself better because ultimately your relationship with yourself is the most important relationship you're ever going to have.
Yeah.
And so we spent a lot of time today talking about romantic relationships, but just remember that attachment is a reflection of how you see yourself at the end of the day.
Hmm.
And so the better you know you, the better you can love you.
Yeah. No, that was amazing. Like mic drop moment right there. I love that. I wish we could just end the podcast on that note, but we won't. I promise we won't. That was beautiful. So, aha moments that might suggest someone's attachment might be affecting mental health or relationship satisfaction. Just dissatisfaction with your
Mhm,
relationships or with your own behaviors, right? So not liking yourself as a partner can be a really big one, right? What
mhm.
else do you have, Chelsea?
Yeah, I think again, I'm glad you brought up specificity because to me, there's some really specific things that I recognized in myself in my first couple of relationships.
Mhm.
Feeling panicked when someone says that they want to spend a day alone
Yeah.
or that they want to go out with with their guy friends or their girlfriends and not bring you.
Mhm.
Does that instill a sense of panic in me? When I go to bed every night, am I replaying every moment with my partner, looking for signs that they were bored, angry, paying attention to somebody else? Am I hyper analyzing little moments before I can rest and feel secure?
Yeah.
That was a big one for me in my first relationship. I found myself kind of every night before I could go to sleep, I had to go back to the last exchange we'd had and decide what that person's mood was with me in that moment.
Mhm.
And if it was not a satisfactory one,
Yeah.
then it would bother me until the next day when I got a text or an interaction from them that felt more positive.
Yeah.
Now, granted, there was some insecure attachment on both sides in that relationship that we obviously didn't have the tools to deal with. But to me, that I think is one of the biggest indicators that there is dissatisfaction and insecurity is how much time are you spending analyzing what's
Mhm.
happening in your relationship?
And the health of your relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, because self-reflecting and talking through, hey, how can we make this better? Obviously, we want to move forward. So, what do we need to fix before we can talk about maybe taking our relationship to the next level? That is different from my entire brain is consumed with, are you mad at me? Are we okay? Are things going well? Is everything
Yeah.
all right?
Are you gonna break up with me? Yeah.
Yeah. And again, another one that can sometimes be a little bit, I think, painful and difficult, but important is, do you have a lot of turnover in your relationships, friendships, or dating wise? If it seems like you're always in conflict with people, if it seems like you're always having to start over with new friendships and new relationships, is there a lot of turnover in your life when it comes to people?
Yeah.
Sometimes people come and go in your life, and that's a normal thing. Sometimes you become friends with somebody and it turns out that they're not all that great, or they don't fit into your life very well, and so you move forward. But if this is constantly occurring,
Yeah.
it might be a sign that you might be a bit of a common denominator in that equation. And that one is not always so fun to face because we like to think other people are the problem when they exit our lives. And sometimes they are, but sometimes they're not. And we have to be able to be honest with ourselves about that.
Yeah. Well, and I think a good point for reflection too is kind of asking ourselves, what type of partner or friend do I want to be? And not just the kind that I want to have either. Because I think we say that a lot, of asking what people we want in our lives, but what kind of friend or partner do you want to be for other people can be a good point to kind of jump off of as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Do I and kind of on those same lines, evaluate, what kind of partner do you think you are? When you're in a relationship, what kind of partner are you? And again, sometimes that sort of self-reflection is not our favorite thing to do, but everything that we've talked about today, again, really boils down to those two things: awareness and effort.
Yeah.
And if I'm not aware and can't be honest with myself about what kind of partner I am, then it's going to be really difficult for me to realistically assess what I expect or need from my partner.
Yeah.
So
it all starts internally. Yeah. So, okay, we do have homework for you today. So, what you can do here, the intention is I'm going to ask several questions, or like start with several like qualifiers for a sentence. And the goal is you listen to it, write down a response to it for yourself, pause it probably, and then hit play again and hear the next one. So, I'm going to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 4-ish of these. So, okay, for example, when I feel close to someone, I tend to blank. And you can pause it here if you want to write that down and then continue to the next one. So when someone pulls away or becomes distant, I tend to blank. One thing I wish I could change about how I respond in relationships is blank. And like I said, I would sit with these for a while because, there's going to be your gut reaction in response to these questions, but also sit with them and think and try to think of concrete examples in your life. So, the last time I felt close to a best friend, how did I respond and react in that relationship? The last time that I felt that someone became distant from me, how did I handle that situation? And can kind of, chart your thoughts and your reflections and your memories out of what this could look like. Because like we said, I mean, this can kind of help give you a really good guidance point to kind of see, not only how do I respond in relationships, but what are the motivations or like core emotions behind that too.
Yeah. I like to ask myself, if Taylor Swift and I had just broken up, what kind of song would she write about me?
What would be her honest appraisal? Yeah.
We listen to breakup songs and we decide which ones remind us of our exes and which ones remind us of the problems in our relationships. Which ex are you when it comes to those? Think about your favorite breakup songs. Now go listen to the ones that don't remind you of your partner and consider whether somebody could have written that song about you.
Yeah,
it's a great self-reflection exercise.
What song is your ex listening to about you? Oh,
I shudder to think.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today in your go-to space for honest conversations about mental health and well-being. We're your hosts today, Brittany
and Chelsea.
And we're so glad that you spent part of your day with us. So remember, taking care of your mind is just as important as taking care of your body. Be kind to yourself, reach out if you need support, and know that you're never alone. So until next time, take care and take a deep breath.